We're going to be taking a break at 10, and then more witnesses coming in, but to talk about hemp, which is something that we don't really spend too much time on, but we will be likely spending time on it next week, following week, because it is in a bill that is probably going to be coming to our committee. So to get a head start.
The 323.
Yes. Yeah. Bradley's going to give us just some legal background on hemp, and then we'll have Steve Collier come in representing the agency. We've invited the chair of the Cannabis Control Board to come in. I'm not sure that we're going to have time to do that today. If not today, tomorrow. And then we've also got the Vermont Woodlands Association coming in this morning. Had reached out. We had spoken earlier in the session, the director of that organization and I, and they expressed an interest in coming in and just giving us an update on what they do. And so we'll hear from them. But in the meantime, Bradley, thank you for joining us. And we're all ears, I think, for the next 20 minutes, although I'm sure we'll have questions.
Okay, sounds great. Riley Shulman, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I'm just kind of giving a verbal overview of the bill, but it is sections 26 through 29 and S 323. And this will be transitioning the oversight of hemp and hemp processing from the Agency of Agriculture to the Cannabis Control Board. And some of the background on why this is happening. And you folks are aware that up until 2018, a lot of hemp or hemp products were Schedule I, federally speaking, and so prohibited and at the federal level. And but there were some pilot programs and that were allowing the cultivation of some hemp and hemp products with some limitations on THC content. And so there's a federal law in 2018 that kind of opened the door for a lot more hemp and hemp products to enter into the market.
Federal law?
Federal law, yeah. And so what wound up happening in the last 6 years was that there was a proliferation of hemp and hemp products. And some of it was intoxicating based on the THC content and the kind of different variants of THC that could be in hemp, multiple different variants of THC in one hemp product, something of the sort. So there was some concern that intoxicating products were being sold under the guise of not being an intoxicating product, under the guise of being hemp. And so federal law changed in 2025 to kind of tighten what is and is not hemp. And there's some ambiguity there because there's fear that there might be, well, there is fear that there will be more products, more hemp products that are considered Schedule I drugs and prohibited at a federal level. And so what the Cannabis Control Board, in consultation with the Agency of Agriculture, but the Cannabis Control Board is would like to do is to kind of unify oversight of cannabis and hemp into one regulatory agency so that they can better control, test for, and ensure that hemp and hemp-derived products don't have more than 0.3 milligrams of THC, of any THC content in them. And so that's kind of the federal oversight. The state has been has had programs since I think 2014, maybe even a little bit earlier for hemp and hemp processing. And so it's part of our state and looking to just kind of change the regulatory scheme to make that safer and more secure for hemp processors. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I think it was in the big, beautiful bill was added into it. Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. And Kentucky is a big hemp processing state and also a big bourbon state. And they were taking the distillate from hemp, which is, I grew hemp 1 year in Austin. You do a lot of money.
You and everybody else, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
which year out of curiosity was that? There was a boom and kind of a bust then.
19, 18,
Yeah,
19,
okay.
somewhere in there. And 30 acres, grew the hell out of it. I had tremendous yield. But anyway, it'll come in a lot of times a little bit hot. And they can distill that off.
Mhm.
And then they take that distilled product and really they can do some wonderful things with it without going full-blown THC, but it is THC. And McConnell changed the federal law to protect the bourbon industry in Kentucky. And much to the chagrin of his fellow Republican Senator Rand Paul. So that's some of the backstory on it. And that it comes out, it's kind of like a paste, that distillate. And I was in a lab and I was looking at it and I said, I smelled it. And, you know, did what any farmer would do. And stuck my finger in it and went like this. And my mouth instantly went completely numb. And I looked at the guys in the lab and they were going, no, no, no. And I stuck my finger in my mouth. And I looked at it.
Cocaine?
Exactly. I said, you clever sons of guns. I said, I know exactly what you're gonna do with this now. And if you have a toothache, get that stuff. If you wrote that on that, it didn't affect me at all. But it was just like
Painkiller.
pain be gone. Absolutely, absolutely. So I think there is real that changed my whole mindset because I'm the guy that never smoked dope, ever. You,
Wild Bill.
Me either, for real.
wow, you knew.
So 20,
Oh,
We're room full of nerds in here.
You missed the member from Browning.
Yeah.
Started to list the drugs he had done, and we were like, we're alive here.
Well, it was a CAX and Brownings this morning.
So we're gone.
Never mind.
Oh, yeah.
Off track
We're
here.
all gonna be in the St.
So-
Johnsbury lockup. before.
so back to him and Bradley's, somebody else had a hand up. Representative Brown.
Bradley, could you just for the audience and to update me since I did a lot of reporting on various hemp and cannabis bills back in 2019. Just describe, like, when we say hemp,
Mhm.
is it synonymous with cannabis? Because as I understood, then it's the same plant, but cultivar wise, you can have one, essentially breed or variety grown, for flowers and THC, and other varieties, what we usually call hemp, is grown more for the fibers or other,
Yeah,
things you can use it for.
that's exactly right. And it's the same plant, different processing, is probably the easiest way to kind of think about it. And Representative Nelson is exactly right. There's been a proliferation of hemp derived products, kind of different ways to synthesize and process hemp. To have different kinds of effects, whether they're intoxicating or numbing or something of the sort. There's just been a proliferation of different kinds of products in the last 6 years. And so that's why the federal law kind of changed. Because it said, okay, well, there's actually a lot you can do with hemp to have intoxicating or sometimes intoxicating adjacent effects. And so the federal law changed to kind of try to rein that in a little bit. And here we are.
So intoxicating adjacent, a mild buzz. Is that
Maybe, yeah. I think intoxicating adjacent's my word. It's because they do have different kinds of effects. They're supposed to be, calming or like a tea could be calming or something like that, but there's also concern that like how much THC is in this, or if you process a THC differently, or if you add different strains to the same type of product. And so I think from the federal point of view, and then from this bill, from the federal point of view, they just kind of wanted to ban and restrict and kind of put Schedule A on things that they think will be intoxicating, or at least put reins on things. And from this bill's point of view, it wants to kind of bring the processing, growing, and producing of hemp and hemp-derived products into kind of one umbrella to make sure that, okay, these things aren't intoxicating. And if they are intoxicating, they have to be registered in a certain way, registered and labeled in a certain way, so people know what's in it too.
I was on this committee back when we did all of this, and it was really clear that THC level was the key.
Mhm.
It was obviously that they're same species, but if you were above the level, your hemp was destroyed. It wasn't hemp. It was below your hemp. It was very simple, and I'm surprised it's become so complicated. You mentioned a change in federal law. Did you actually say what changed?
Yeah.
I
So,
missed it.
so the federal law in 2018 was Delta 9, 0.3 THC content of the Delta 9 variants of cannabis. And what changed in the federal law is it changed that to just 0.3 THC content of any variant. And so I think the confusion and the proliferation of hemp-derived products that could be intoxicating is because there's different variants of THC. So there's Delta 8, and then a whole bunch of other variants that I can't rattle off the top of my head. But those variants of THC technically were not covered under federal restrictions and proliferate. And so there's some concern that you could have a Delta 8 THC content product that is more than 0.3% by volume of THC, as long as it's Delta 8. And the Cannabis Control Board will probably be better to tell you about the different varieties and how those work and synthesize and things of that sort. But I think the overarching concern was, okay, we have all these different strands, but the regulatory framework only looks at Delta 9. The federal framework changed that to look at any THC content, and which might now start to exclude some hemp-derived products that have more than 0.3 of a THC content of a different variety.
So it sounds like we're talking about processing of hemp. Because back in the day, it was made really clear that if you tried to get high by smoking hemp, you're going to get a terrific headache before you're going to get any kind of psychotropic effect. So it seems like the casual user, grower, isn't going to have the tools to process to make these specialized products. I mean, at the farm level, the farmer's not going to have that stuff. The farmer, I'm just confused why it's become an issue at all. Because yeah, if once the processor has it, you make something, you can regulate that. But why would we be regulating the farmer?
That's a good question. And so the processors are, can you process the hemp and make all sorts of products, right? It's not just for smoking, but, honey, gummies,
Yeah.
teas, infused energy drinks. The farmers, still have to follow, federal laws, federal regulations as well. And, what that specifically means for specifically growing certain plants and things of that sort, that's a little bit beyond my expertise. But suffice to say that this regulatory framework tries to kind of bring, what this does is it just puts people into three categories. Producers, which they use synonymous with growers. So growers are producers. Processors who will kind of take the product and then process it into something, or take the hemp and process it. And then products, which any hemp-derived product of more than 0.4 THC content, so something that could be intoxicating under federal law, has to be registered with the Cannabis Control Board. And then there's some restrictions on sale because you cannot sell those in interstate commerce, and you can't sell them to anyone who's under 21 in the state of Vermont. And so, especially with the kind of regulatory scheme where cannabis and some forms of hemp are Schedule 1, are federally prohibited, the Cannabis Control Board feels that they have a better control over both the growing, the processing, and the labeling of products to make sure that everything is in line, and to also give growers some a little bit of freedom. I guess it would be struggling with the word, but kind of maybe regulatory certainty that, you know, if we're following these laws in this way, we're not going to get in trouble. You know, there's definitely caveats in this sector with cannabis and hemp now anyway, but growers have been interested in, you know, trying to make this clearer for themselves.
Boston?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit where this came from. Like, you're presenting a bill to us, but I don't know what the history, like, did it pass from the Senate?
Oh,
Did it
yeah.
come from another committee? Like, where did it come from?
So this this is in the miscellaneous Senate agriculture bill, Senate S-323.
Okay.
And the impetus from the bill came from a request from the Cannabis Control Board, I believe in consultation with the Agency of Agriculture to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Lipsky?
Yeah. What year did the rules change? Federal?
Yeah, so the federal rules, they kind of opened the door in 2018 and then closed the door in 2025. But those rules, I think it was like November 2025, the federal law changed, but it will go into effect sometime a little bit later this year. I think maybe this summer, but don't quote me on the exact date, but very recently. Yeah.
And most of us are familiar with CBD, and is that effectively, so CBD infused consumables, consumptibles, teas that you mentioned, for example, those items that have been on the store shelves for quite a few years will not be since the 2025 law, is that?
Yeah. I think the concern is that those things could be swept into something that might become unlawful. And so it's trying to give some regulatory certainty on those things. I think like the specific products and things of the sort, the Cannabis Control Board would have a lot more because sometimes those CBD drinks can be intoxicating, sometimes they can't be. It just kind of depends on what's in it from a chemical point of view.
Follow-up question. The state lab down in Randolph, did they ever get asked to test for whatever you call those, the THC or Delta, and that's, can they test cannabis or?
You know, I'm actually not familiar. I would assume so, but I'm not 100% certain about that.
Representative O'Brien?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the same thing that back in the day, right, CBD, because I mean, originally hemp was illegal because it was whatever that is, class 1. You know,
Schedule 1. Yeah.
Schedule 1. Yeah. And then Kentucky managed to get a pilot project to develop hemp that was, you know, without THC, and that led to the CBD being used. And so when we were doing this, there were all sorts of, it was the same thing as John saying that if your CBD was finally then legal, but if it had too much THC, then it was, you know, you couldn't use it. So there's that conversation. It sounds like it's coming back again. And
Yes.
you know, in the meantime, what was it again? The class
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1. Yeah. Right. So right, cannabis has been what, Schedule 2 now?
No,
It's not Schedule 1 anymore, right? So that's been downgraded.
I don't know if that actually happened. I'm actually not 100% certain on that. I know there's been a lot of talk about descheduling cannabis. I don't think it's actually happened. But I know that's a priority of the Trump, well, I shouldn't say priority, but I know that has been something the Trump administration has discussed, is descheduling cannabis. And I think there might even be an executive order to the effect of at trying to promote the cultivation of hemp as well. So on the federal level, there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Thanks, man.
And Schedule 1, it means that, it is full stop prohibited. There's no, the federal government has determined that there's no appropriate medical use, and there's no good use for that substance.
Fentanyl is
Yes.
two. It's not even Schedule 1, I think.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Amazing.
I think you can get fentanyl prescribed by a doctor under certain circumstances. And federally speaking, they're not going to approve medical marijuana, for example, under a federal health insurance program or something of the sort, because there's no legitimate use for cannabis as far as the federal government is concerned at this point.
As far as the federal government.
Federal government.
It's the whole deal with the hemp is, what do you do with the distillate? What do you do with because you can bring a hemp plant that's limit 0.3. 0.3. So if you have a hemp plant that's blowing out a 4 or 5 or a 6 even, they can process that and bring out that Novocaine and set that over to the side, and then what do you do with that? And it has value, and it has it to the industry. It has value, and so that, and we're gonna have everybody coming in because they're gonna want to have it at farmers markets, and there's people that we could have a witness list for a week on this issue. And I think there's people over at the agency, AAFM, that would like to talk about this.
Representative Lipsky.
Thank you. I don't use any of this stuff, but you hear different opinions about this CBD cream. For some people, it's the save all for like pain medicine or arthritis. To me, it seems like snake oil or it's psychological, but I have no idea. Who is it for some ailments that it actually works? Has the FDA ever confirmed that it's a valid, salve for pain or arthritis?
So
Is it on sale and promoted that it has that value?
a lot of those products do not have FDA approval because of the federal prohibition on identifying medical uses for cannabis and in some respects hemp. But it is going to depend, because CBD is not cannabis, right? And so I think, and that's where my expertise kind of breaks down, because I start to kind of like lose the thread about what threshold something becomes illegal, unlawful. And I think that that's a lot of people's concern about these products, and also from a grower, producer, and someone who's licensing a product, their perspective too, because they want to know what follows state law, what follows federal law, what doesn't. And so those are good questions. And so it is important on those products to look at FDA approval, because the problem is a lot of people assert that these kinds of products do have a valid, legitimate medical purpose, but they're prohibited from being studied at a federal level because the underlying THC is Schedule 1, and they're not allowed to actually study it. They're not allowed to do tests, and so it's just kind of a little bit of a question mark.
It's interesting, though, historically, going even further back than you started, is you look at World War II posters, many of them said, grow hemp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we were hearing the hemp testimony before, it was amazing the different products we got from hemp. fiber,
Rope.
even rope. I mean, in World War II, it was rope and
Concrete was one.
and the concrete blocks, the hemp blocks are just, I mean, it's amazing the versatility of the product. And it's just, it's kind of odd and that's why we said, if it was below a certain THC level, it was not it was not marijuana, it was hemp. If it exceeded it, it was no longer hemp. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the correction at least at the federal level anyway was in 2018 they tied it to Delta 9 THC Delta 9 of the Delta 9 variant of cannabis, right? And so, but you could have other variants, synthetic processes and things of the sort have proliferated since then. And those aren't necessarily caught up. And so it's interesting from a chemical or processing type of situation or perspective to see just like the number of products and the different ways that processors have decided been inventive enough to create new kinds of products. But that has, on the flip side, has given a lot of people some pause in terms of, okay, are these too many products or do we really know? And also, what about labeling? Make sure that when someone's buying a product, they know exactly what they're getting.
Nelson.
Thank you. Is some of the disjointed noses on this coming from, because when you make that distillate, whether it's Delta 9 or Delta 8, is some of this coming from the cannabis people because of stepping on their toes?
That much I'm not familiar with. I think the Cannabis Control Board might have some perspective on that, though.
Because it kind of sort of is.
Mm.
You could grow hemp's unregulated. We go down to your place and I could bring my water wheel and my plastic puller and we could lay down 30 acres of hemp in 3 days, work like a bastard, and then you could spend all summer bush hogging it and weed whacking it. But, you could lay down 30 acres and,
It was a quarter of a million dollars.
125 anyway, if you don't charge land rent, so. And with cannabis, you gotta get a permit. If you get a permit, you can only have so much and
Fencing, all this
so
stuff,
on
yeah.
and so forth. And with hemp, you can make a drum of that stuff pretty quick.
Representative Lipsky.
Thank you. It's possible that only Rep. O'Brien and I were here 3 years ago in this committee when we had the hands and puppets.
Their chair was,
Yeah, but he's not sitting
yeah,
there. And he was here. And it was clear that this committee, it was not considered an agricultural product. Did that include hemp or just cannabis?
Just cannabis.
We had the cannabis board in here 3 years ago. Why were they here? If you said it's not, well, our committee, because it wasn't an agricultural problem. Do you recall why they were?
I mean, we talked a lot about hemp in here in 2018 and 19, right? Then there was the great bust. And since then, hemp hasn't come up in here once. Yeah.
But that
Cannabis
is-
has though, because I think there's always going to be this tension between some of the industry saying, this is a plant, it's agriculture. No matter what's happening at the federal level, it's a plant that gets grown. And then on the other side, people saying, no, it's a drug, it should be a CCB. But and then curiously, we're talking about municipal regulation of agriculture because cannabis was part of that Supreme Court lawsuit. Like ducks and cannabis. So it would make sense to somehow
It's appropriate to be in.
figure this out. Yeah, and I think, right, municipal regulation, unless it's pretty clear, I could see that that's something that a lot of municipalities would like to potentially add even further restrictions to. And I think right now, towns have to, I guess,
Cannabis?
yeah, if you're a grower, can towns ban that, or do you just
Yeah.
you need a license? I know.
Yeah, you definitely need a license. So there's a specific zoning statute for cannabis saying that towns cannot prohibit cannabis cultivation in their districts, but they can zone it. And they have to have at least one place where it is zoned. So they have more leeway to zone cannabis than they do any other agriculture activity, at least our understanding of it.
Yeah.
Taft Street.
Well, what about the issue of individuals? Thought the Vermont law allowed a family or an individual to grow.
Yeah,
three
that's
plants,
Mhm.
6 plants.
We had a lot of discussion and questions here. Did we derail what you were gonna tell us?
No, I mean, Chair Durfee just wanted me to just tell you that the bill exists, give you some background on it. I think one thing I want to flag for the committee is that it does change the fees for growing, processing, and hemp-derived products. And so current law sets a fee for hemp growers at $25 or $25 if they're growing it for personal use. And there's going to be a new fee structure in the proposed in the S323 where it's, I think, $50 for grower, $500 for producer, and then $75 per product if you want to register it. And then it's also taking out fees for hemp growers. There's a statutory scheme that you have to pay a certain fee based on the poundage or acreage of hemp that you are growing. And you have to pay a certain fee, and then that fee is gone. And so those fees can actually get pretty pricey. Currently greater than 50 acres of hemp or greater than 50,000 pounds, you pay a $3,000 fee. And it's much less, 1 to 50 acres or 50,000 or less than 50,000 pounds is $1,000 fee. Those fees are gone in the new bill. Yeah. And so that's just one thing to flag, because when you're changing fees and things, that always kind of raises some interest.
Does what they did downstairs create more obstacles for somebody to grow hemp? There may be advantages to keeping that an agricultural product. And there may be advantages by not. I don't know enough about it. I've been hearing rumblings. And
so those are good questions. And so one, hemp is still an agricultural product. It still has to follow the RAPs. It's still kind of regulated as a plant in terms of agriculture plant. So it's not being considered cannabis, which is not an agricultural plant. Whether it's going to be more or less difficult, I think the answer to that question is two-pronged. One is the federal law made it more difficult. And so there were a lot of hemp growers who were concerned that they might be out of business or might not be operating their business in a way that is safe for them. And so that said, I don't have an answer. I think it would be a good question for the Agency of Agriculture or the Cannabis Control Board to kind of talk about the ease of regulation. From the statutes, I don't see much change in terms of requirements and things of that sort, but how that happens on a practical basis in terms of applying and working with the board and the board's knowledge of agriculture and agricultural practices, those are good questions for the board.
What's the correct terminology these days? Because it used to be, we called it marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
We switched to cannabis, but cannabis is a genus name and hemp is cannabis because it's the same genus.
Yeah.
So how do we make the distinction now with psychotropic cannabis versus hemp?
I've been saying cannabis to refer to the plant that is intoxicating, and I've been saying hemp to refer to the agricultural product. I might be wrong on that. I think that might be a good question for the Cannabis Control Board, but that's how I understand it in statute. But if the terminology has changed more colloquially, that might be something we might consider updating.
As far as I know, the genus name for the hemp plant is still the same.
It is.
Cannabis, so
Yeah,
it gets confusing very quickly.
yeah, that's exactly right.
One thing that I remember, and presumably it's still the same, is if you're growing cannabis for psychotropic, you've got all these different varieties. And if you're growing it outside, number one, you have a security issue. Number two, if anyone is growing hemp nearby, your psychotropic cannabis is just going to be totally messed up because of cross pollination. So you have to be very careful if you're trying to breed for various psychotropic effects to do it in a greenhouse and really control pollination. So the way they're grown is, at least from what I was told before, is so very different. You've got very controlled psychotropic cannabis, and then you've got hemp that can be out in the field and, whatever, where you're going acres and acres. Is that still the way it works out there? And
I think that particular question is a little bit beyond my expertise.
okay.
Bradley, do you know, just in general, does this committee have some bit of jurisdiction over cannabis and CCB work, because it's not agricultural?
Not cannabis, right? And so
That's judiciary usually.
I think so. Only, yeah, it's health. I think so. It's my colleague Tucker handles that. But it's a controlled substance. Same thing with alcohol and things of that sort. And so we have jurisdiction, or this committee has jurisdiction over hemp because it is an agricultural product.
And this bill, is it just referring to hemp? So that's why it was at Senate Ag.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So if we were to go with the Senate version, hemp would no longer come under this committee?
That much, I don't know. I think that would be a good question for the clerk, right? Because it's not in Title VI anymore. It would be going to Title VII, but it's also an agricultural product. And there's a section in this bill that specifically says hemp is an agricultural product. It has to follow the RAPS.
Thank you, Vice Chair. You've used the word psychotropic. Could you explain to me, what is that, Latin or Greek or what?
Maybe I'm not using
Psycho
it.
is
No, that's right. I remember it being described as that.
what's the genesis of that word?
I'd have to look it up. It's just a word I've always heard relating to the effects of THC in the body and that it's mind altering, but exactly what is psychotropic look. What exactly what it means, I'd have to look at.
Does psycho mean mind, tropic mean changing?
You're asking me the same question.
Psyche does
Point of
mean,
order.
psyche does mean mind. I don't know what it means, but it.
All right, I
Sounds
just,
great. It's a great business.
I just want to try to.
I've studied neither
At least-
Latin nor Greek, so I can't tell you the words without looking
wanted
at
to
it.
pretend I'm educated.
So I don't have anything more to report on the bill. I'm sure it'll get referred to this committee and we can go over the nuts and bolts at that time and then hear more from the Cannabis Control Board or HCB Agriculture. But does this committee have any more questions for me?
Well, it's great to shift gears and get caught up on where we are. Representative Burt.
What's the number?
S323. And it is sections 26 through 29. Starts on page like 36.
This book doesn't even have 26 or 29.
I don't even think it's been on, I don't think it's been noticed yet.
It's the Senate, has it come to the Senate floor?
Yeah, I don't think it's even
It's being ripped apart in different committees down there right now.
Being
only dealing with hemp. These sections. I mean, this bill doesn't touch cannabis at all.
It's,
But S323 is a miscellaneous
It's a book.
agriculture bill in Senate.
and so it
It's a
had
big
to
one.
go to different committees and.
I'm curious, he just brought up a point, you characterized it as being ripped apart. Is the bill facing a lot of changes? Because we're trying to figure out whether we should be taking testimony in preparation for this big bill that's coming, but if other committees are making significant changes in the Senate, maybe amendments on the floor. Can we expect a lot of changes from what the Agriculture Committee in the Senate?
That's a good question. I'm familiar with one amendment that does not touch hemp, though. I think the finance committees have it right now.
This, yes.
Yeah, just one more. I mean, what's interesting is this is almost a 180-degree turn because the last thing we passed, it wasn't hemp, but it was cannabis.
Mhm.
It was small scale outdoor cannabis would fall under the reps. Or at least it, I remember the Senate started this bill that we eventually passed, that let, it was sort of the size of a bowling alley. Of
Okay.
bowling lanes,
Yeah.
Of outdoor cannabis, as long as it was, if it was on a farm following the reps, it sort of fell under the reps. So it'd be interesting to see how this might completely turn that around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the hemp will stay under the wraps.
Like
I don't think that's a question at all.
cannabis,
But yeah, cannabis.
maybe that, whatever that law was, it has to maybe go away.
And the wraps are, water quality, right? And so anything that's going to have a significant adverse effect into the waters of the state have to be regulated by the federal government, right? Or per the federal government. And the wraps are how we implement those requirements. And so if there's agriculture activity, you're exactly right that, cannabis could and probably should, and if it affects water, should fall under the wraps. But those are open questions.
So we've got agriculture, food and markets coming in at 10:30. If we want a break, we should probably take it. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
what's up and
Appreciate it.